Okay, continuing uh, my reply to the rejoinders of Nietzschean 101 regarding the death penalty. Um, Nietzschean 101, in one of his rejoinders, takes up my objection to the death penalty about the racial and economic disparities that exist in the administration of the death penalty. Study after study has shown that there are these inequalities, that there are biases in terms of who gets the death penalty along racial and socioeconomic lines. Um, Nietzschean 101 says that he thinks that these uh, inequities are regrettable, that we should strive to eliminate them as much as possible. But nevertheless, he argues that even though they exist, there is reason to think that we should continue with the death penalty. And he makes a very clever analogy in his argument. I'll call it the soup kitchen analogy. Imagine, he says, that there's a soup kitchen and it administers, obviously, soup to men and women, but it gives a disproportionate amount of soup, more soup to men than it does to women. This is an inequity in distribution. But no one will argue that we should shut down the soup kitchen because of these inequities in distribution. Likewise, the same can be said of the death penalty, says Nietzschean 101. Why give it up simply because the punishments are distributed unequally based on racial and economic considerations? Now, I hate to raise a logical quibble at this point, but I'm afraid I must, because I think there's a logical problem with the argument. And so I'm going to get a little technically, I'm going to get a little technical here at this point. And basically, here's what I would say. While the existence of the soup kitchen or of soup kitchens is nearly indisputably an unqualified good, the death penalty is not indisputably an unqualified good. After all, many, if not most, nations in the world have abolished the death penalty, and public opinion is very divided on the topic. So therefore, to posit the administration of soup to the hungry as analogous to administering the death penalty is to beg the question about the death penalty being an unqualified good. And that is precisely what is at issue. And it doesn't help to advance the discussion to assume what one hopes to prove. Now, of course, the obvious reply is that while the death penalty may not be an unqualified good, it may nevertheless be a necessary evil. But then there's no analogy between the soup kitchen and the administration of the death penalty. Because no one would argue that a soup kitchen is a necessary evil. It's necessary, but it's not evil. So it seems to me that his reply breaks down on logical grounds. The last argument that Nietzschean 101 makes, and it's really not an argument so much as a kind of hunch that he's working out. And he basically gives us this intuition that he has, that some people who oppose the death penalty do one of two things. Either they empathize with the murderer and not the victim, or, and this is, he admits, is the most dark of the two possibilities. They secretly envy the murderer's crime. That is, they actually wish that they could murder someone and get away with it. And so they oppose the death penalty um, because of this secret wish they have of murdering someone and getting away with the crime. Fortunately, I was exempted from the list of those who oppose the death penalty, who are subject to these intuitions. But nevertheless, I wanted to deal with them. Um, I would say, first of all, it's not clear how many non-supporters of the death penalty uh, that Nietzschean 101 has in mind. Does he believe that most people who oppose the death penalty either empathize with the murderer and not the victim, or secretly envy the murderer's crime? Does he mean a substantial number of people who oppose the death penalty, or maybe just a minority of people who oppose the death penalty? Now, if it's just a minority, then it's hardly a point worth making. After all, we should expect aberrant reactions leading to a variety of positions. In fact, one could argue that there could be aberrant reactions that would lead to people who support the death penalty. I mean, consider the person who vicariously works out his or her homicidal feelings through the application of the death penalty. They want to see somebody get it. They're angry, and they have murderous feelings. And although they won't murder themselves, they vicariously get some pleasure knowing that society does it. Now, what if I argued that most or a substantial number of people who support the death penalty are like that? There'd be something, I think, a bit unfair about me doing that very thing, and presenting it as a kind of argument. I think that Nietzschean 101 must mean that a significant number of those who don't support the death penalty either empathize with the murderer and not the victim, or secretly envy the murderer's crime. And I would ask you to think of how many people that must involve. When you think that of the number of people who oppose the death penalty worldwide, and I think that now most nations of the world have abolished the death penalty. I know that most of them in the Western world have. Then we're talking about hundreds of millions of people. Hundreds of millions of people who, according to Nietzschean 101's intuition, either empathize with the murderer and not the victim, or secretly envy the murderer's crime. Wow. What an indictment of hundreds of millions of people that is. What a dark assessment that is. I guess I just can't share that level of pessimism about human beings and about positions that they sincerely hold in favor of preserving life.